Hello everybody, James here, Storytime with Dutch, episode 60.5 we're calling it, or Ask Dutch Anything 3 or 4 this is now. We don't really do the plugs here, but we've got books, we've got t-shirts, and we're on every Friday and Tuesday, and this episode is for you, the fans, to ask Dutch a question, and Dutch has got a question.
Also, I used to do this, and this is for addicted wrestling fans. I do a deal where I talk personally to people. They want to do a private storytelling session, and I do it for up-and-coming wrestlers. So email me, Dirty Dutch Mantell, and we'll do it virtually like we're doing now. And if a young guy wants some advice on his career, I'll give it to him. Cost him a little money, like going to the doctor. But I got 50 years experience, and I think if anybody wants to tap that experience, I'm going to give them a chance. And also, anybody who just wants to talk old-time wrestling. It's almost like them getting in, say I'm getting in the car with you right now, and we talk going down the road. Fans can do that with me.
Well, I don't know why you just don't do cameo. I mean, you could do a cameo and just say, for your cameo, ask me one question and I'll answer it straight to you.
I can do that.
Yeah.
Should I do that?
You should totally do cameo. I think you get loads of interest. I've said this to you off air. Yeah, definitely.
What if you're wrong?
Well, then you've lost nothing.
Cameo is but I'm gonna join Cameo either today or tomorrow.
Do it.
You know how long they wanted me to be on Cameo?
Ever since I've known you, you've been saying that they kept contacting you, yeah.
A year. And I don't know. I don't know. I can't explain it. I'm lazy, I guess. I don't know.
Just don't give it away for free. That's what we've learned over. I mean, yeah, we give this show away for free and stuff like that, but we made money in other ways. But, for that, yeah.
That's because we respect wrestling fans.
Mm-hmm.
Because wrestling fans, to me, they're the most loyal fans ever. I mean, you have loyal fans to all sports. If wrestling fans can hang around after the shit that we've given them and they're still there.
On this podcast? I mean, or in wrestling in general?
No, we give great stuff on this podcast. Great stuff.
Mm.
But it's like the crap they get on TV, and they still sit there and go, what the hell was that? What is the lure of professional wrestling to people? What do you think?
Good question. I don't know.
And
it was the superheroes for me, because I started watching 93, so it was sort of the larger-than-life kind of presentation.
I on my Facebook page, I wrote one time, are you addicted to wrestling? My God, I was covered up. And it's some people that said, well, I never really realized I was addicted till you brought it to my attention. There is some people, if it just has wrestling in the headlines or shows a ring or shows a wrestler or shows something, they're going to read it. And I don't know what it is, but it is an addiction, believe me. It's hard to break. It really, really is. Because I think wrestling is poor man's Shakespeare. It's been described. But it's there, it exists, and people will talk about it.
The thing with wrestling
on Cameo, if I join Cameo, you can actually come and ask me a question, and I'll give it to you.
Yeah, with that being said, wrestling is the most unique business in the world because it's a bit of rock and roll, it's a bit of stand-up comedy, it's a lot of sports,
everything.
It's a lot of it seems to take it's the bastard child of entertainment in the sense that it's a bit of everything, yet it's nothing like anything else at the same time. Having said that, we are going to move on to the questions. As we say, it's the most rapid-fire half-hour or so podcast on wrestling podcasts, I suppose.
Okay, let's go.
And this first one, if you want to send any questions, questionsfordutch@gmail.com. And this first one is from Chris Gonzalez. Who was the most difficult wrestler you ever dealt with? Thank you for your great podcast. Now, I'm going to more specifically say, booking-wise, the most difficult wrestler that you had to book who would also always push back with your ideas.
Well, there's been several. I'm gonna say one of the when I was with TNA, the guy who was a problem was Austin Aries. Very talented guy, but you'd have to explain everything to him. Why? And he wouldn't want to do this, and he wouldn't want to do that, and a pretty good guy, really. But you'd have to give him and he could do great finishes. He was a great talent, but you had to break it down and talk to him. Another thing is, I think, Sting, especially in TNA, you'd have to explain stuff to him. And all the guys who came to TNA from WWF or E, they wanted to know why they were doing certain stuff. And I've said this before, a lot of guys that came from WWE, if you gave them something, they would look at it in two lenses. One is the TNA lens, but the other lens, the WWE lens, knowing that Vince was probably watching the show or getting a report on the show. And if Vince didn't see the show, I don't know when he'd have time to watch it anyway. Somebody would say, well, this guy did a job to so-and-so. Now Vince will say, okay, he did a job there, so that writes him off the list. So, and there were a few more that I really can't remember now. Because remember, most of my time in TNA, where did I spend it?
Catering.
In the catering room. Somebody wanted to bitch or argue, they would have to come to the catering room, and I sat on the very end with a door. So when they came in, I'd go out and circle back around and I'd come in the door so they think I left. But anyway, booking is not hard. I mean, booking is hard. It's not just booking something that you think would draw, which is headache enough. You got to book it around a guy not wanting to do it, even though it fit what needed to be done. They would take it another way, that you were booking them specifically to hurt them, to beat them, and to hurt them. I don't know why you would want to hurt your product, but they would take it personally. And I got all kind of reports. Oh, Dutch Mantell gives this and he don't care and blah, blah, blah. And they could have possibly gotten that idea. But a lot of guys just didn't. And the guys who were bitching were the ones we weren't using that well. Because you can't put 9,000 people on a TV show every week unless you want to have a lot of 5-man tags or 4-man tags. And I think those suck because they're hard to do. They're hard to figure out. And there's no focus in them unless there's one already there and you want to work on. But then you got to get in there and work with these guys. And it's you can book it. I'm not saying how good it would be, but you got to watch who you got to put in the match. There's a lot of different aspects that go into that.
Yeah, when you say difficult to book, you said, people you'd have to sit down and explain to. Is there anybody there who would listen to your pitch and just go, nope, not doing it, and then wouldn't even give an alternative idea?
Well, they never said, nope, I'm not doing it. The best way to do that is saying, what do you think of this? But if somebody says that, I don't like that. Wait a minute. You don't like it. Why? But they couldn't describe what they didn't like other than the finish. I don't want to get beat. And that's why you see screw finishes a lot, because one of them don't want to get beat. But I worked a way out of that too, because guys can get beat and not hurt themselves. They can hurt a leg, they can hurt a shoulder, they can hurt their neck, they can stop the match. A lot of things that are believable. Fans may not like it, but I think they like that better than a screw finish, a referee screw finish. I hate those. And so we tried not to do too many of those. And I hardly did any when I was in Puerto Rico, because I didn't want my heat on the referee. I wanted the heat on my heel. And actually, I would beat a lot of babyface. I would beat a lot of heels, especially on the what we call spot shows. We weren't there every week. Let the people pay for their ticket and leave happy. That's what you wanted them to do. If they leave, that screw this shit. I got screwed out of my. They can't give me a clean winner. I don't want to go anymore. And you would lose fans, I think.
Next question. Dermot asks, 6-sided ring or 4-sided ring for TNA? Which did you prefer and why?
I hated the 6-sided ring.
Why? It's loads of fans. Let me tell you this just before you answer. I had Eric Bischoff on my other channel, and he said, hated the 6-sided ring, 4-sided. Nearly every single comment from fans said, I love the 6-sided ring. That's a terrible take. We want the 6-sided ring back.
That's because they didn't have to work in it. A 6-sided ring throws you off. I mean, as a talent. I mean, you can make it work. You can make it, but now these are the guys that made it work, like AJ and, James Storm and all those guys. They made it work, but it is very difficult to step in a 6-sided ring from a 4-sided ring. And the purpose in TNA of having a 4-sided ring is because, first of all, it was different, totally different. So now they got the octagon. That's 8 sides, right? Mm-hmm. But that's MMA. So I don't get that either, but they can have what they want. Guys learn to work in a 6-sided ring. Okay, say a guy wants to do a crossbody block over the top on the wrapway. Well, he's just going over ropes in a 4-sided ring. In a 6-sided ring, he's going over the turnbuckle and the post. So he's got to get a little bit higher. So you have to, when you step into a 6-sided ring, you have to adjust, and you have to mentally adjust before you even do the move. You got to think about it. So a lot of guys, they do crossbody blocks like laying down on the couch. It's second nature to them. But to learn to do it a different way, it takes some time and it takes some effort.
I know you never wrestled in TNA, but did you take a bump on the 6-sided ring just to see what it felt like compared to a 4-sided ring?
Did I take a bump?
Yeah, just to see.
Hell no. And you were going to ask me like hard rings. That's a question later on.
Yeah, that's for later on. I will get to that. Was it harder just because there's like less surface space in a sense? Is it a harder ring 6 sides than a regular 4-sided ring?
I think it's reinforced differently. And taking a bump in most rings, if you're not used to it, yeah, it hurts. I mean, if you took me now and wanted to slam me, well, why don't you call the ambulance before you slam me about 10 minutes before so they can rush right in there and take me out. I think they had to, a 6-sided ring has more infrastructure to support. And right in the middle, you can make it to where it gives. And that's what rings do now. They all come in, but they have like a circle type deal where it can give a little bit with all those connecting rods that hold the floor up. And even putting the ring together, that has to be designed. I mean, the 6-sided ring, I don't know who designed it, but I know TNA ordered the ring, and the guy said, yeah, I can do it. And I think TNA ordered 3. I didn't order them. They ordered 3 rings, and the guy's out of North Carolina. I can't remember his name now. And he had them there on time. We ordered one. We took one to Orlando. Or maybe took 2 to Orlando. One's a standby ring in case something happened to the main one. And I think we took 1 to Nashville and 1 on the road. I think we ordered 4 rings. And they weren't cheap. They're about eight grand back then, about $8,000 a piece. So they spent like, what's 8 times 4? 32. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can multiply a little bit. But they spent 32 grand on rings before we even got started. And I have no idea where those rings are today.
Next question is Bill from Eureka, Missouri. I was under the impression that Buck Robley became Bruiser Brody's mentor and advisor. I've never heard Dutch talk about Robley. I thought Robley's run in Central States as Booker from 77 to 79 was the best run in the territory in my lifetime. So, Buck Robley stories.
Okay, where did he say the best run in the territory? Where was it?
Central States. So that'd be
That's
Kansas City, yeah.
Kansas City. I never knew Kansas City to draw a dime, to tell you the truth. But with a good booker, it is possible. We drew a little bit of money out there, me and Ron Bass, when I was out there with Ted and Jerry Oates. We drew a little money, but not much. I think Robley made his big booking move. He had in two play in Mid-South, Bill Watts' territory, and in, I think, San Antonio for Tony Blanchard's dad.
Joe.
They had Joe Blanchard. And I always heard he was a good booker, but Buck's, you ever seen Buck Robley in the ring?
I'm just looking at a picture of him now. He's quite skinny, and he seems to be looking at his own arm with like a big weird cast kind of thing on it.
Yeah, because he always said he had a broken arm for like 2 years, and he wore the cast and he used it. He'd knock people out with it, which wasn't a bad gimmick, to tell you the truth. Buck could get heat, but in talking to Buck wasn't the most friendliest guy in the world. He had a different personality. He was all business between, smoking dope and drinking beer. And he was about half hammered most of the time. And I met him in Puerto Rico. He came down there to book, and he lasted about, I don't know. And I knew he wouldn't last there because his personality didn't fit there. I think he lasted about a month. Then he left. And the question was again, what about Buck?
Buck Robley became Bruiser Brody's mentor and advisor. Is that true?
In San Antonio. They were pretty close. I think Buck and Brody would talk about Japan a lot. And I think Buck saw an opportunity to latch on to Brody. So he would be considered with some of those Japanese tours, which I don't blame him there. And if Brody was willing to take him, good. And if they enjoyed each other and they were friends, but he wasn't too bad in the booking department. It was everything, the antisocial attitude he had. Because I have never sat down with the guy and talked to him. So I just hear just different rumors about him. And that's about my extent with him.
Next question. Kevin asks or says, "Hi Dutch, greetings from India. Hope you are well. Love listening to you on the podcast. Just wanted to mention that Lance Archer, with Jake as manager, used the short clothesline as his finisher on a recent AEW Dynamite episode." Now, this is sort of our recent campaign to have you recognised as the inventor of the short arm clothesline here, but I'll add on to this. Lance Archer / Lance Hoyt in TNA. He was there in the weekly pay-per-view days, wasn't he? He was really early. Was he? I think he was.
I don't know if he was there doing the weekly. He may have been weekly pay-per-views.
In my mind, he was tagging with Kid Cash, if that sounds right.
Maybe. I remember them in the building now. Yeah, they were, I think. See, all that, I was there 9 years, and it's a blur. It really is. It is a blur. And I was no drugs, no alcohol. It's just like, it just never ended. Somebody would say something here. Somebody would say something here. Then somebody would say, and I was hearing all this like every Monday when I would go in. And then every Tuesday or Wednesday, we would do the weekly pay-per-view in Nashville, get on a bus like a country musician and drive all night on a bus to Orlando, and you try to sleep on the way down, but you can't sleep on the way down on the bus. Guys are drinking, guys are partying, playing cards, yelling. It's a bunch of guys that are adults acting like they're 16 years old on a bus. And I could have flown. I should have flown, really. I had the option. But Jeff would tell me, take the bus. It'll be fun. I would get to Orlando. I'm so damn worn out. I don't know. That's when I should have done some drugs. I didn't. That's when I actually would need them. But now we're back to Lance. And Lance used my short clothesline, right?
Apparently so, yeah.
Well, that had to be a suggestion from Jake, who actually did it beautifully. In a short clothesline, if the guy, it's all in the guy taking it. It's not in the guy throwing it. It's in the guy taking it. If he can take a good one, oh, it looks great because all of a sudden it's there, bam. It's not a long, drawn-out thing. You run into him, and Lance Archer is a great athlete. He's from Texas, isn't he?
I'll just double check. He is from Gulls, Texas.
Okay. Good guy, big guy. And I think if somebody got him and really worked with him, they could get him over. He's a good worker. He really is. And put him with Jake, Jake's a good mentor. The wrestling part, he's a good mentor. Don't tell him how to do the other stuff, Jake. Just tell him how to wrestle, and he's fine. Yeah, he was a good guy. I liked him.
Yeah, to probably steal a line from Eric Bischoff, with Lance Archer, he seemed to, quite late on in his career, start catching on in Japan. He ends up in AEW, has a decent, like so many others, has a decent first bit of a run in AEW, and then he somehow enters the AEW Witness Protection Program, and no one hears from him for goodness knows how long. But he's
a big guy too.
Yeah, he's a big guy too.
He's about 6'7", maybe a little taller.
Why does it take some people just years after they break in to finally sort of get comfortable in their own skin, or just whatever it is, just to click and it works?
Oh, I told you on the last program we did. That's why people need to listen to all our stuff. Because what did I say? I said a guy can get in the business at, say, 22, 23. He doesn't really pop to it. Oh, he can pop to it a little more, but till about 28 or 30. Because all of a sudden, and with me, it just boom, like a light went on. Okay. But you learn when you get over. Then you learn what keeps you over with the people, what would hurt you with the people. Then you learn to read the temperature in the room, and you're in a lot of rooms. And I've said this before as an analogy. It's like a comedian going to the stage. You got to fill that room first. And I've had comedians tell me that. And once you can, and then you test them with this joke, you test them with that, you test them. And now you're seeing, you're trying to get over with them. That's why these comic routines start out kind of slow. Then some of them end up great. Same way with the match. Start it slow. And if the people are already hot, and just keep them hot. If they're lukewarm, you can heat them up. If they're nothing, you gotta get them to lukewarm first to see if you can heat them up. And some crowds are unheatable. They're like ice. They might melt just a little bit. And that's as far as you're going to get them. But it takes Lance, like everybody else, it takes him time to learn the ins and outs of any business. So you didn't get into podcasting and know it all right when you started.
I knew nothing.
See, and you're learning the trends now. You're learning when business is up, when views are down, and it's summertime, you told me, right?
Well, when I started, it was...
When did you learn when the views are up and the views are, no matter what you got?
I don't know what the question is. You're gonna have to explain it.
Oh, okay, you look on how many times a video has been viewed,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's down in the summer.
It can
Did you
be,
say that
yeah.
it's lower in the summer?
Yeah, it's the first few months of the year, the summertime when the kids are off school. You know, I learned there are peaks and troughs throughout.
Yeah, it's like the winter is down, and the summer, spring doesn't come up much, and summer lays there in the fall, and then you're back to winter.
Then you're back to where you started from again.
Oh yeah.
SMW fan asks, do you have any memories of Ric Flair being offered $120,000 per year to wrestle once a month for Smoky Mountain Wrestling? Rick Rubin offered this sum to lure Flair in, so it has been reported.
Who sent this question?
SMW fan.
Okay. First of all, I don't think Rick Rubin, he may have been a huge Ric Flair fan. I do not think he offered him $120,000 for one appearance. As a businessman, why would you do that? Because they didn't get paid. They didn't get paid for their TV.
Let me correct you. It was going to be an annual 120 for one appearance a month, so it would have essentially been $12,000 per match or per appearance.
10,000 a month.
12. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, 10,000 a month. Yeah, or 10,000 per match, 10,000 per promo, whatever.
Now he may have done that. I think he could have done that. 120,000. I'm thinking, who in the hell did you hear this from? SMW fan. He may have offered Flair that much money for one appearance, but he didn't take it, did he?
Nope.
And I wonder why.
Ooh, well, in '91 he went to the WWF, and then
that was the reason. That was the reason. Then.
And then he left in early '93, so maybe back to WCW. So maybe it was around this time in '93. Who knows? I mean, it could have just been.
If he was
leverage.
if he was in WCW, he would have probably taken that offer. Because he wasn't making 10,000 on one appearance in WCW, maybe unless it was like Starrcade or something big. But I guarantee you, they could have went to Greenville, South Carolina, and they wouldn't draw but maybe $10,000, $12,000 for the whole house. And he wouldn't be getting anywhere close to $10,000. So by him being offered $10,000 by Rick Rubin, which I think now is possible, now that it's broken down, I wish he'd have taken it, really, because that would really help Jimmy out a lot. Because they could have really worked to a point to where they would have made that TV. I mean, you can't miss it TV, and it'd been worth $10,000.
Well, with Flair, I mean, even Flair at this time, let's say it's 93. Do you think Flair, or even 91, when the business was just on the downturn, do you think Flair would have made a difference? Do you think Flair would have even paid for himself at this time, just because of the massive downtrend of the business in the early 90s?
In 91, that is doubtful. He would have even paid for himself. Because it went through, I thought that actually the business can't die, but it can die, and it can be put on life support. It's barely breathing. And during that time that WWE was taking over everything and WCW was trying to get in a position, the business, even the independent shows weren't drawing. I mean, and some of these independent, and that's what happened to the independent money, because the independent promoters, they weren't giving, even decent money sometimes to make an appearance, because they were afraid they were going to lose their ass. I don't know. It was a strange time to be in the wrestling business, and especially at my age then, I'm thinking, well, now what the hell am I going to do now? And I worked through it. That's why a lot of people ask me after the Bruiser Brody death in Puerto Rico, why did you go back? The reason I went back, because there was nowhere else to work. if I wanted to stay in the wrestling business. I was basically trained. I had no formal training in anything except, and I didn't have any formal training in wrestling, really. I mean, what are you going to put on a resume? What did you do for the last 10 years? I was a wrestler. They look at you like, what the hell? What do you want to do here? Because that's a business too. They want you to come in there and know your job, be experienced in the job, if you can be, especially if it's an office job. But being a wrestler qualifies you to do one thing. You know what it qualifies you to be?
Wrestle.
A wrestler. Or possibly a booker. And that's it. But anyway, in 91, yeah, it's possible that Rick Rubin, are we still talking about that? Rick Rubin offered him $10,000 for one appearance.
Right, we'll ask two more questions and we'll shut this down. WrestleFan, how hard were the WWF rings as compared to the current WWE rings? Any other differences, like with ropes or ring apron size or sound they make? And there's a couple more questions there as well. But for now, WWF rings versus WWE rings during your 10 years with the company.
They were similar, but WWE rings till Jimmy Cornette told me the story. Vince came, I think, either to Memphis or he was with Cornette or something, and they showed him what a ring should actually be. WWE rings used to be like concrete. You couldn't break it. But that kept guys from taking big bumps because it didn't give. You can't take a backdrop on concrete or on bricks. You can't do it. It will break you in two. You'll take one, but you won't take the second one. But some of those rings used to go, that's what you want. That gives you the sound. Wow. You ever hear a ring? It's all that sound it makes, but it gives. So if it gives somewhat, that softens the landing, but without bothering the artistry of it. And you hit. They showed Vince the ring. He said, well, and they told Vince, your rings are too hard. They're too hard. And he didn't believe that. So he went and had all his rings remade to make them softer in the middle. You don't want them too soft, but you want them soft that you don't kill your talent over time. I've seen some rings, my God, I've been on really hardwood floors and not as hard. And that's, if you will watch, if anybody goes to an independent show and you watch a guy go to the ring and he's a little bit seasoned and experienced, he walks around that ring and checks it out, checks the ropes, checks this, jumps around here. And what he's doing, he's testing the ring. He's seeing where the hard spots are in it and how the ropes give. Some of those ropes are so tight, you almost decapitate yourself from the chest down. But ropes, they got to give too. And the more ropes that give, the more spring they give you. So you got to check that ring out. And if a ring's hard, guess what? It's a stand-up match. And I've gotten a ring in hard rings with veterans. Guess how many bumps we take? I took a few, but he didn't take any. He said, you got to be effing kidding me, kid. Going down like shit. They were rough. So I learned a lot by working with these old veterans, especially in hard-ass rings.
Do you know, there's two more questions here. I think we'll save those for next week because they sort of relate to something else slightly. I'm going to ask either one or two. This one, I know you don't have an answer to, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Dylan says, hello, Dutch, do you have any stories or memories of the Dynamite Kid?
I've never met Dynamite Kid. I went to WWE in let me think.
I'll tell you.
95.
95.
And 96. And I have trouble with all my other places I went because they all run together, especially when the territory started to die out in the mid 80s. And by 86, 88, they were still going, but they were like on cruise control. They were on automatic heartbeat. And then all of a sudden they just folded. So, and the question was about who?
Dynamite Kid, who you never met.
And by the time I got to WWE, he was already hurt, and I never met him.
He was gone over 6 years. He was gone in 88.
He was gone in 6 years. He wasn't there, though. I think he was back in. He was somewhere.
No, he left in 88. He was longer.
Okay, well, he was way gone. You're right. I got my dates all messed up. Never met him. I just heard that he was some of his ribs were very, very extreme.
Mm-hmm. I'll ask you this one. Dino D. Dutch, correct me if I'm wrong. I remember reading online that they forgot to rank a wrestler in the PWI 500. I think it was in the mid 300 range. I believe it was for the year 1999. I'm pretty sure that you offered to take the spot in the PWI 500 because you were unranked. I think they gave it it gave it ranking to someone else or never awarded it. I find it ridiculous that you haven't been in a PWI 500 ranking since 1998. Thanks. I don't know quite what the question is there, but I mean, like when you were in the business, how bothered were you about the PWI 500? I mean, did you ever even pay attention to it?
Hell no. Listen, these magazines are written by professional writers who make money off that. They're going to take the hottest wrestler, unless, of course, you're willing to pay some money. And guess what? All of a sudden, your interest increases. They start writing about you in the magazines, which has been done lots of times. And that's how Paul Heyman got a lot of his notoriety. That's how Cornette got it too. Bruiser Brody, I don't think he paid any money, but they started writing about him because he would call them up and they were marks for him. And I'm using the term marks as fans. They were fans of Brody. And this was Meltzer, huge fan of Brody. So he would write about him. Eddie Gilbert would do it too. Mm-hmm. Eddie Gilbert would write one of them. He says, I'm thinking about Atlanta. That's all he'd write. All of a sudden, in the next, like Meltzer's hot sheet, dirt sheet, Atlanta's thinking about bringing in Eddie Gilbert. That gets his name out there. Then he'd say, well, you know, WWE has a little, WWF, they have a little interest too. Then it comes out, oh, WWF is he going to be an agent? Is he going to be a wrestler? So now you got WWF, WWE, WWF, and WCW writing about him, and he was thinking about going to Memphis. Oh, he may take the book over in Memphis. Where is he? So 3 straight weeks of magazines or months of magazine, they're talking about him. And what happened to Eddie Gilbert? We need to dedicate a podcast to him.
He will be a full
because
episode.
What happened to Eddie Gilbert is he would plant these stories himself, and then people would start asking him, but his phone would not ring. Then he would get depressed. That's what happened to Eddie. And then he married Missy Hyatt, which I don't think helped him at all. I think, you know, he was married like 3 times in like 5 years, 6 years, something like that. And he took my place in Puerto Rico when I was booking it, when I left. And then when he went down there, I think 3 weeks or 4 weeks after he took the book, he was dead. He died in Puerto Rico. And a lot of people said it was heart attack. I think it was more like maybe taking some too many somas, but they never released it. They said heart attack, which is possible. But the Eddie Gilbert story is a unique story. I loved Eddie. Great guy. But And he always fashioned himself a booker. He was booking cards when he was like 10 years old. He would write a fake card down, and that was his card. And he taught himself to book basically by watching Memphis TV. Now, it was a fan booking, but probably some of his stuff was pretty good. Crazy, huh?
With Eddie, I think by the time this comes out, it won't be a surprise. So it'll be the day of, actually. Todd Gordon, the ECW founder, owner, told me that Eddie Gilbert, when he was booking for him, Eddie Gilbert was actually the conduit to getting ECW, Eastern Championship Wrestling at the time, in Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer. Because Todd Gordon, I think it was Todd Gordon, said, what do we have to do to get more notoriety? And then Eddie Gilbert said, well, we need to get into the newsletters. How do we do that? Leave it with me. And then from that day or that week forward or whatever, they used to forward all the information, all the cards that they wrestled. That's why ECW's history is so well documented, partly because they used to write down all the card, who won, who lost, send it over to Dave Meltzer. And that's one of the big reasons why ECW got some early steam really young in its existence.
Well, that's what Brody was. I just came up. I just said that Brody would go through them too. A lot of people in a lot of areas of the country didn't even know who Brody was. Like, he would go to Florida and Texas, but he spent most of his time in Japan. But the rest of the country really didn't know Brody until he started getting into Meltzer's sheet. And Meltzer is another good subject we need to get into, because he took a little dirt sheet, and he's never wrestled a day in his life, and he's a critic. You could call us critics, but at least I've been there. Meltzer never been there. He's just taken other people's word that this is happening, and this is happening. And when he made a mistake, he never came back out and recanted he made a mistake, or never said he was sorry, even though it was what he may have said was brutal. But a lot of people put it, and a lot of people, they thought that Meltzer put out gospel. Meltzer, he just wanted to fill up 3 or 4 sheets. But Meltzer was probably the most prolific writer of just words ever in the wrestling profession. And he was the first one to take it national, a little bitty mimeographed bunch of pages, staple them together, and charge somebody $2 a month, and he'd ship it to them. So if he had enough subscriptions, he had a living. Now he's doing very well.
I want to ask, well, I will shut down after this, but you said before that certain wrestlers used to pay certain journalists. I don't know if this is more like Bill Apter and the Apter mags. Do you remember anyone, you don't have to throw anyone's name out there if you don't want to, but do you remember anyone who actually did pay Bill Apter or anyone like that to get their name out in the newsletters or magazines?
Well, if anybody did, they kept that secret. They thought that their greatness in the ring was what prompted the article. And if anybody paid for it, they would, unless the person putting out the magazine or the dirt sheet told me, I wouldn't have any idea knowing. But I knew that, I don't know if Eddie paid. I think that was a quid pro quo situation. And they needed news. They needed insider talk. But a lot of guys now call them up and fill them in, thinking that will help, will prompt Meltzer or Alvarez or somebody to write good stuff about them. Because now Tony Khan allegedly has hired Dave Meltzer to kind of handle stuff for him.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that he's paying him, but I do know for a fact that they are friends. And apparently, this is what, from Dave Meltzer's own lips, he said when there was like a bit of like a technical blackout on one of the recent AEW shows, he texted Tony directly to tell him about it.
That's last week.
Yeah.
Yep. But he said they didn't have a winner in a match, that it didn't come across on screen. And apparently they went back and they played it at the end. Meltzer takes credit, but that could have been a TV guy.
Yeah.
That could have been a guy in the truck. They said, "Hey, that didn't play, and we didn't get a winner. So, well, let's replay it at the end." Meltzer's taking credit for that mistake, which is okay. Somebody gave it to him because you don't know who gets what, and if you have a blackout and you miss it, you need to go back and cover it.
Okay, just before, because I want to qualify what I said. No, I don't think Dave Meltzer's paid directly by Tony Khan, but the fact is that, one, he's got a close relationship with Tony Khan. He puts on the kind of wrestling that Dave likes, and I had an example for you of when people say Dave Meltzer's got biased coverage. I think it's more subtle than that. When he's talking about something in WWE he doesn't like, let's say a bad match, he says, "Oh, it sucks." If he's talking about a bad match in AEW, he'll do one of two things. He'll say, "It wasn't that good." You know, he'll dance around it, or he'll say, "Well, at least it wasn't as bad as this WWE match on the same week." And he did that a couple of weeks ago. I noticed this myself. He dances round. He won't call it fairly with AEW and WWE in the sense that, let's say, two bad matches, he will use all the language in the world to say that the AEW one wasn't that bad, whereas WWE would say, "Oh, it's terrible."
I'm going to call up Dave myself on my weekly call.
Well, you're paid by him.
I'm going to tell. Yeah, oh, yeah. Well, I pay him. I'm going to call him up and tell him that you blasted him on our show so he'll watch it.
I'll give one more example. And I noticed that, and I never mentioned this, and I'll mention this to you now. This was a couple of years ago during COVID, and I think it was at the times when there was no one in the audience. And Dave Meltzer praised an AEW show, I think it was Dynamite, saying Chris Jericho was co-commentary. And he was saying he and Tony Schiavone were having a great time. They were bringing up all these great old references. And it was specifically, they were making jokes about old references. And then in the NXT report straight afterwards, Dave blasted whoever it was for making old references on commentary from 20, 30 years ago. And I was like, well, hang on, you just praised Jericho and Schiavone for doing the exact same thing that you blasted NXT for. And I think it was NXT as well. It's one of those things where I just think, it makes no sense. If you're being completely unbiased, it makes no sense to bring that up.
Well, he used to really, really cover Smoky Mountain Wrestling up. That's when him and Jimmy Cornette got along. Apparently, something has happened in the interim that kind of pulled them apart. And all of a sudden, Smoky Mountain wasn't as good as what Dave had been pronouncing before. But
that wasn't with Dave. That wasn't with Dave. I'll tell you what that was. That was with Wade Keller. And
yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I think they had like some fallout, or was it Mark Madden? No, it was something to do with Wade Keller. It was Wade Keller or Bruce Mitchell at PW Torch they had a fallout with, and I think that's when he started getting less good coverage. And then Cornette blames Wade Keller or whoever it was at PW Torch for reporting something that Smoky Mountain Wrestling was going down the tubes, and someone in, was it Cincinnati, they were trying to get TV at, or something beginning with C, some city beginning with C, Chattanooga. And apparently the person, like one of the key people at the TV station Chattanooga, read this and said, "Oh, we don't want Smoky Mountain Wrestling because they're going down the tubes, they'll be off air in a few months anyway." So Cornette blamed Wade Keller or PW Torch for basically killing the company.
Well, Chattanooga would have probably been their biggest town.
Yeah.
It's bigger than Knoxville. And it's on that interstate, so it's not that far from Atlanta and Georgia, North Georgia. They would have done good. I think they would have done very well in Chattanooga. Great wrestling town.
Are you embarrassed or impressed with my American geographical knowledge?
I am impressed because my geographical knowledge of England is about as good as my geographical knowledge of Europe. Because once it gets past France, I can't figure it out.
It's Germany and then some other things. Right, we're going to shut down this podcast. We've gone over our allotted time. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to send a question in, do it to questionsfordutch@gmail.com, and if it's good enough, it'll make it into the script, and if it's really good, we might even ask it, but goodness me, we try and get through so many of these, but if we don't ask it in so many weeks, please send it back in again, and it'll be added back to the list. But for now, thank you very much for watching. We'll catch you again on Friday, and Dutch, we the people.
We the people. See you next week.